I'll
Sure,
share
sir,
you the
sure.
link once it's starting. Actually. Okay.
So are you enabling the video now in some time?
Yeah, we will.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar hosted by Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation. Very happy to have this webinar with Dr. Syed Riaz Rizvi. Today, our moderator for today's webinar would be Dr. Deepamala, who's an associate professor with Gautam College of Physiotherapy. Welcome you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
As the speaker, I don't have to introduce you to this person. He's a very well-known person, a physio who's been doing a lot of workshops across India, right? So welcome you, Dr. Syed Riaz Rizvi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And a very warm welcome to you, because people have been expecting your webinar from a long time, and thanks for giving us time and sparing your time to share some knowledge of yours.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So, Dr. Deepa, please, you can continue with the session, sir, now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would also like to first of all thank KSPF for choosing me to be the moderator for today's webinar. And of course, I would like to take the opportunity and great pleasure for introducing Dr. Syed Rizvi, sir, as today's speaker. Sir has made already a very huge contribution in our field of physiotherapy. He is right now the chief instructor and director of Institute of Manual Therapy and Taping. Sir is currently serving as the associate professor at KTG College of Physiotherapy, Bangalore. He has been able to instruct and guide over 7,000 delegates in the concept of manual therapy, taping, and MFR, and so on. Sir has also published several papers in national and international journals. Today, Sir is going to share with us and interact with us regarding sixth scapula syndrome and its implications on shoulder dysfunctions. I wish all the viewers today to gain and take advantage of the precious time and knowledge which Sir is going to share with us. And without wasting any more time, I would like to hand over to Rizvi, sir. Sir, thank you so much for accepting this and sharing your knowledge with us. Over to you, sir, now.
My pleasure, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
So can you enable the video now, Mahendra, sir?
Yes, sir. Enabling it now.
Okay.
Sir, can you on your video, sir?
No, sir. It's still showing you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it. I'm trying, sir. Wait.
Check once again. I'll check once.
Just check, sir. No problem. Take your time.
Yes, sir. I'm already over to you now.
Yes. Audio is clear?
Very clear.
Okay. Hello, everyone. A very good evening to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank KSPF, Professor Ayyappan, VR, and the entire team for organizing this series of webinars. Next, I would like to express my profound gratitude to Dr. Mahendra, Deepmala madam, for coordinating this and moderating this. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, ma'am. Now, to all the participants out there, let me brief you on what today's session is going to be about. Now, see, when I spoke to Ayyappan sir also about this, I thought of taking a topic which will help you think a little out of the box and give you some idea into clinical reasoning of shoulder conditions. Okay. Now, when we have so many conditions we study in a formal education, DPT, MPT, in shoulder, right from your frozen shoulders to your impingement syndrome, rotator cuff, so many conditions are there. So I would not like to revise or overdo that again. You have learned it. But when it comes to scapula, no, very few conditions we study. Maybe your winging you study in your bachelor's, or springle shoulder, but not much. But if you see recent literature in the last decade or so, some significant contributions in the literature by authors like Keebler, Buckhart, and many more. They have shown us that clinically as well as per the evidence-based practice, we can see that scapula is such a major contributing factor in so many of our clinical conditions. And this is still one of the underrated aspects or underlooked aspects in our rehab. So I'll try to give you a sneak peek or an overview or an intro why you should focus on scapula also while working on shoulder conditions. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. If you want, students who are out there, even practitioners, we feel like, take a pen, maybe a paper with you. Some important points I'll be telling, I'll try to. So later you can read about that, refer that also. I'll also be telling some authors around between, you can write down. Okay. Now, see, when we see so many conditions in shoulder, like you see painful arch syndrome or rotator cuff, impingement, we have our tests, right? We do our empty can test for your supraspinal test, lift off for your subscapularis, knees impingement, Hawkins-Kennedy impingement, correct? But we have seen of late, even in the evidence, that you cannot blindly depend on the special test as well as your laboratory investigations. It has to always correlate with your examination findings. Now, this is where there's a catch here. When you say impingement, we think, okay, the pain is in the area of the shoulder, and the common notion which we see in a formal education or the way we are trained is you treat the area of pain. There is pain in the AC area, so you apply ultrasonics for your friction, manual therapy, whatever. But when it comes to shoulder, as we all know, mobility at the cost of stability, right? So here, it is not advisable or wise to only look for the area of symptoms. You have to understand the connections here. When you work on the shoulder, clinically, you have to always see proximal to distal. That is the trunk, the thorax, then the scapula, then comes your shoulder. If you don't work this way, sequentially, proximal to distal, that is, if you have a proximal base, only then the distal segments can move properly. If your scapula is not stabilized, in short, the trunk stability is not proper, mobility is not there, it's abnormal, malpositioned, then no matter how much you work on the tendons or on the shoulder area, it might not give you the best results. So that is where the question of understanding scapular musculature comes. Understanding scapular kinetics and kinematics. Now, when we speak of this topic, sixth scapular syndrome, I'm sure some of you must have heard of this earlier. You must have heard scapular dyskinesis. But today I'll try to give you a brief idea what exactly is SICK. Okay, SICK, S-I-C-K, basically is an acronym. Okay, S-I-C-K is an acronym. I'll tell you the full forms and details now. See, in the acronym SICK, S-I-C-K, okay, S stands for scapular malposition on the rib cage. That is, it is malposition. What happens commonly? The scapula gets inferiorly positioned or placed. Then it's contralateral opposite scapula, slightly lower. So that is what the S stands for. Okay. Then your I stands for inferomedial border winging. Winging we all know, right? Medial border comes up. In SICK, what happens along with the medial border? Your inferomedial border comes up. It wings up because of muscle imbalances. We see sometimes your pectoralis minor is tight, so that pulls the scapula anteriorly. There's anterior tilting, and along with that, there is weakness of the middle and lower trapezius. So this muscle imbalance, reference for this, you can study Vladimir Janda's work. He explains very good about muscle imbalances. So this muscle imbalance causes inferior medial border winging. So SI, S stands for scapular malposition. Scapula gets placed slightly below inferior. I stands for inferior medial border winging. Okay, what does the C stand for now? C basically stands for coracoid tenderness. Now what is this? This is one of the hallmark signs of sixth scapular syndrome. If a patient has anterior shoulder pain, tip of shoulder, this coracoid inside, right? What happens commonly is, one common factor in sixth scapular syndrome, actually in many shoulder conditions, is your pectoralis minor gets tight because of a postural dysfunction. This flexion, kyphosis, pec minor gets tight. And when this gets tight, no, it pulls on the coracoid process. The technical term for this is traction tendinopathy. Due to the pull, there is a tendinopathy. And this causes pain or tenderness in the coracoid process. So C stands for your traction tendinopathy or coracoid tenderness. SIC. Last one is K. What does the K stands for? K stands for kinesis abnormalities in the scapula. In simple words, scapular dyskinesis. Now what is this? Scapular dyskinesis means any abnormality in the position or the motion of scapula on the thorax. Okay, so these four things together: scapular malposition, okay, inferior medial border winging, coracoid tenderness, and your kinesis abnormalities. These four things combine your six scapular syndrome. Now, you might think, sir, but how do we understand clinically? Don't worry, I'll give you ideas in sequentially now. Okay, when you have a patient in whom you see there is shoulder pain, you always observe for the scapular. If you see it is anteriorly tilted, if you see there is slight winging, you have to start thinking in these terms. It might be potentially a six scapular syndrome. Now imagine if there is this kinesis abnormalities, okay, there is anterior tilt and there is winging, muscle imbalances are there, that is pectoralis major and minor are tight, lower traps, middle trapezius, sorry, full form, middle trapezius, even rhomboids is weak, even serratus anterior is weak. So this causes scapula to come down, slightly tilted, and it gets stuck there. So what happens is when you move the arm, no, the scapula doesn't move with this. When you're moving the arm, scapula is supposed to rotate with that. But because of these abnormalities, it gets stuck and doesn't move. And this causes the head of the humerus to get hitched into the glenoid. And that starts causing your impingement kind or rotator kind of symptoms. So it feels like it is a clear-cut case of impingement or tendinitis, which it might also be there. But if you're treating on that, you have to always see the proximal and then the distal. That is, as I said, your thoracic, then your scapula, and your rotator cuff tendon. Okay, now let's progress. Okay, what are the physical examination findings? See, when you see a case like this, six scapular syndrome, the physical examination findings you see are three. As I already told you, I'll repeat once. Basic one is scapula gets shifted downwards. Second, it might or might not get shifted laterally. It might also get slightly rotated laterally. Okay, so infra, lateralization, and abduction. Down, outward, and slightly rotate outwards. These are your classical findings. Now, how many types are there in this? I'll try to explain simplistically. In six scapula, there are basically three kinds. Okay, type 1, type 2, type 3. This is Keebler's classification. Now, why it's important? Because the type 1 and type 2 is commonly associated with labral issues, slap lesions, labral tears. It's associated with that. Whereas the type 3 is associated with your impingement kind of symptoms, impingement syndromes or rotator cuff. So what is the difference? See, in type 1 of dyskinesis or six scapula, what happens is there is more of inferior medial border winging. So what happens here? Pec minor is tight and lower traps is weak. So you have anterior tilting. Okay. Now in type 2, what happens? The entire medial border of scapula comes up. Your classical winging, yes, the medial border of scapula comes up. There is winging. So commonly what we see here is pec major is more tight, and that causes a protraction of the scapula. Okay, and in the type 3, what we see, type 3 of six scapula is we often see pain in the superior medial border of scapula. Now what is this? Sometimes what happens in six scapula, due to weakness of the levator scapulae and the upper trapezius also, the scapula comes down and it keeps pulling on the attachment of levator scap. As you all know, levator gets attached on the superior medial angle. So this causes a pull on the levator, resulting in a traction tendinopathy of the levator scapulae. This causes superior medial angle pain of the levator scapulae. So type 1, type 2, type 3 of subscapula. Okay, I'll revise once. Type 1 is prominence of the inferior medial angle. Type 2 is entire medial border gets prominent. Type 3 is predominantly your superior medial angle gets painful or prominent. That is due to traction tendinopathy of your, traction tendinopathy of your levator scapulae. Okay. Next. Now, what are the clinical findings in a patient that will direct you or guide you towards a six scapula? You have to look for 4 symptoms. Okay, in patients you will see, first they will have coracoid pain, anterior shoulder pain. Next, you will see superior-medial angle pain in patients commonly. Third, you will see your AC joint pain, this area. That happens because of the compression of the clavicle, lateral border of the clavicle against your acromion process. Okay. And fourth is your subacromial pain. Subacromial pain basically happens because when the scapula is malpositioned, the head of humerus translates upwards, migrates upwards. So this reduces the space between the acromion and between the head of humerus. So this causes compression of the tendons there. Okay, so four symptoms: coracoid pain, superior medial scapular pain, AC joint pain, and your subacromial pain. These are the four characteristic findings, clinical findings of your sixth scapular syndrome. Next, coming to clinical implications. Okay, sir, if we check the scapula also, we see these things. There is a malposition, there is rotational dysfunction, anterior tilting, all that. But clinically, why should we take it so much into consideration? Because clinically, it can cause many conditions. I'll explain one by one. One of the conditions that your sixth scapular syndrome usually causes is something called as GIRD. Okay, you must have heard of this. It basically stands for glenohumeral internal rotation deficit. This is commonly seen in patients who are into repeated throwing. Okay, baseball pitchers or cricket fast bowlers or racket sports. Okay, people involved in activities that have repeated overhead activities or throwing, they can have GIRD. Okay, glenohumeral internal rotation deficit. In this, what happens? The patient has more external rotation, okay, and less internal rotation. A symptomatic GIRD is supposed to be said when it has more than 20% of reduction or limitation in internal rotation as compared to the opposite side. One more finding is the total range of motion, TROM, is less than 5% compared to the other side. So TROM is less 5% and internal rotation is less at least 20% compared to the opposite side. So it's a clinically relevant GIRD. And that can also be a clinical manifestation of a sixth scapular syndrome. So there's a connection in these conditions. Okay, GIRD. How to treat, I'll come to it. Okay, the theory part I will tell you. Hands-on not possible so much today, some other time, but some ideas I'll give you. So one clinical manifestation is GIRD. Another clinical manifestation which we can have as a result of sixth scapula is, you all must have heard of SLAP lesion, right? Superior labrum anterior posterior. Now you might think how this might happen. See, when the scapula is malpositioned, right, it changes the axis of rotation of the joint. The axis of rotation changes of the shoulder joint, which also causes imbalance in the force couples. Okay, serratus anterior, rhomboids, etc. It gets altered. So this alteration in the force couple, when you move overhead, what happens? Because the axis of rotation has changed. The labrum, what is the labrum? The labrum is the covering of the glenoid, which increases the congruence of the shoulder joint, right? On the labrum, the long head of biceps attaches. So when you move and the axis of rotation is changed, in overhead movement sometimes, the long head of biceps can pull on the labrum and cause a labrum injury too. So a faulty position of scapula, which you don't think much, can also cause a potential labral issue or a SLAP lesion. So GIRD and SLAP both can happen, not saying always they do, but it can happen as a result of a sixth scapula. Okay. One more thing we see is impingement syndrome, as I told till now, due to change in the axis of motion, reduction in the subacromial space, the tendons get impinged, the head of humerus gets hitched on the arch, and it causes impingement symptoms. Technically, we might call it painful arch syndrome, or may do your Neer's impingement test, Hawkins-Kennedy, and work on it. But when you keep working on it, I've seen many people, with all due respect, when we have rotator cuff injury, we work there, then for strengthening, we go for rotator cuff, TheraBand, TheraTube, whatever. But understand, when the position is faulty, it's affected, the space is less, the more you keep stressing it, the more the injury keeps on getting worsening, the vascularization comes down, the pain increases. So it's always first important to fix the proximal aspect, be it your trunk, then scapula, then move towards the rotator cuff or the tendon. Okay, I'll revise in short ones. The clinical symptoms are coracoid tenderness, coracoid pain, superior medial scapular angle pain, AC joint pain, and your subacromial pain. Clinical manifestations, meaning what this can lead to. Okay, again you have GIRD, which can cause many issues. You have your SLAP lesion, you have your impingement syndrome. Now, a question comes, how to assess, how to examine that the patient has this problem. I'll give you an idea. First things first, check for the motion, observation. See how the scapula is moving. Usually you'll see in 6 scapula patients, after a certain range of motion, 100 or 110, scapula stops moving, gets stuck. So you can check that. Also you'll see winging, it will be prominent, and there will be tenderness in the coracoid. So check for these things. However, if you want to be more objective towards the assessment, there are 2 classical tests which confirm, reliable test, the presence of a 6 scapula. Okay, these are called scapular repositioning test. You can write down, students who are there, or scapular assist test. I don't have a model, I cannot show, I will show you hypothetically, but okay. See, what we'll do is, if there's a patient in front of me, when he has 6 scapula, you know that scapula is tilted and winged. So I'll send you pictures if you want later. What we'll do is, we'll hold the patient's shoulder, okay, and try to reposition it. Try to get the scapula back. This anterior tilting, you get it back, and try to compress the winging part with your forearm. You see this, I hope I can. You get this back and compress with your hand, you reposition, okay. And once you reposition, after repositioning, if the movement is better, pain-free, better, mobility is more, and the movement is more energy and efficient and not laborious, not painful, that means the scapula was the problem. When you corrected it, the problem almost came down. So this is your scapular repositioning test. You reposition the scapula, then ask him to perform motions. If suppose you cannot do it, patient, sir, I'm doing online consultation, I'm not with the patient, what to do? Very simple alternate I'll give you. Okay, I'll try to show. That's why I'm doing with the phone. See, if the patient has pain in elevation, right? So he can't do. You think it's capsule, which you always think frozen shoulder. But if you suspect it's a 6 scapula, ask the patient, dear sir, in online consultation, go towards the wall and press your scapula on the wall. So now what happens? With the pressing the scapula on the wall, you are correcting that position. The winging is being corrected by your pressure. Ask him, sir, now perform the motion. So this is self-repositioning. If he does this and the pain comes down, so it's indicative that the problem potentially could be the scapular position and not a capsule. Okay, so this is your scapular repositioning test. One of the very good tests to know if the pathology is scapular, scapular dyskinesis, or capsular or something else. Okay, now next test is scapular assist test. This you can't do self, you have to be with the patient. In this, what we do is, we hold the inferior angle of the scapula, and when the patient is elevating, right, we assist the scapula. So now if you see that with your assistance, if the motion is better with the scapular assistance, that means that pathology predominantly is scapular and not your capsule or the joint itself. Okay, so assessment means you have 2 things here. Scapular repositioning test, I showed you how to do with your hand or self also. Scapular assist, you hold the inferior angle and assist the motion, then the patient can get a better range. These 2 tests indicate that whether the pathology is scapular or something else you can check. Okay, to test for your scapular dyskinesis. Now next, coming to your treatment. See, when you come to treatment, there are stages here. First thing is you have to check for the imbalances. What are the muscle imbalances and how to correct them? As I said, how to correct, all I cannot show now. We are planning another webinar maybe in the future for hands-on some other time. Now I'll give you some ideas, but okay. See, some dysfunctions we see is in 6 scapular syndrome, inevitably. Some imbalances are, like every patient commonly has a pec minor tightness causing the coracoid pain, and generally they always have posterior tightness. When I say posterior tightness, don't jump to the capsule. Not only the capsule, also the musculature. Your teres minor, other muscles, okay, infraspinatus, they all get a little tight. That's why you have limitation in your interrotation. So, first step is release the pectoralis minor and release the posterior structures. Okay, how to release? I'll give you an idea. So we have time, I will. See, for pec minor, what you can do, If you know MFR, soft tissue release, any form of deep tissue, work on it. If no, try stretching. You'll get it anyway. Books you'll get. Okay. Posterior capsule, how to stretch or release. There are some specific stretches, guys. Okay. Like one stretch is called cross arm stretch. I'll try to show you. I tell the patient, take your arm like this. Okay. And with the other arm, I will hold on my elbow and pull it. This is your cross arm stretch. You also have some classic stretches called as your sleeper stretch. In sleepers, what we do, we lie down, tell the patient to lie down sideline, keep your arm like this and push it down. With your other hand, I will try to push it further down. This is your sleeper stretch. You also have something called as, yes, doorway stretch. I will try to show you. Doorway stretches for posterior structures. You come towards any doorway, okay, at the edge, and see, keep your arm like this. Can you see this? Yes, and then hold it here and lean your body down and front. So this also stretches your posterior and inferior structures. Okay, so first thing is correct the imbalances. Tight structures, commonly pectoralis minor and posterior structures. Stretch the pectoralis minor. There are some different ways for that. Stretch the posterior structures, doorway stretch, what is sleeper stretch, also cross arm stretch, many other things are there. Now, first step is stretching the tight structures. Always, guys, never jump towards rotator cuff. Always go sequentially. First, you stretch the tight structures. Then you have to move. Next step is trunk stability and your scapular stability. Understand, guys, this is very, very important. When you're working on scapular issues or rotator cuff, any pain here, if your trunk and scapula is not stable, if the base is not stable, there are very less chances, and I'm being politically correct here, very less chances of you getting good results here. So always work on the trunk first, then scapula, a stable base you should form, only then you should work on the rotator cuff. Don't directly go towards strengthening of that, it might cause more pain, okay? So even your kinetic chain connections matter here. See, scapular muscles, trunk. If you want to know more on kinetic chain, there is a literature by Thomas Myers, okay? He is the gold standard for kinetic chains. Excellent book he has written, check that. Even kinetic chain connections matter. Many times when you work on throwers, right, we think he doesn't have strength. He has the strength, but the chain dysfunction is there. You have to rectify that and he gets a better throw or a pitch. So work on the kinetic chain, work on the trunk, then stabilize the scapular base, then move towards the rotator cuff. Okay, so first step is tight structures, pec minor and your posterior capsule, posterior structures. Next is scapular stability. Now, what can you do for scapular stability? Let me explain a few exercises. See, there are some very simple exercises. Many others are there. You can read up some other time. I'll give you a brief idea now. Sitting push-ups. You sit and lift your body. Push your arm down and lift. These sitting push-ups help in your scapular activation. Okay. There is also something called as a low row. L-O-W-R-O-W. Okay. Low row. Very good exercise. You also have something called as scapular clocks. Scapular clocks, what we do? Position the arm and move the scapula in 12 o'clock, that's elevation, 6 o'clock, depression, 3 and 9. That's your retraction and protraction. So low rows, seated push-ups, scapular clocks. There is dynamic hugs. Many things are there that you can read up. These all things help you work on the scapular stabilization. Even your Blackburn exercises. Blackburn is you go in prone and take the arm up. Okay, retractors. So once you release the tight structures, step 2 is working on the scapular stabilizers. Then you will see that the scapula looks stable. It's in a proper position, not winging, not tilting. It moves in sync. Then integrate scapular stabilization with rotator cuff, not in isolation. Let me explain how. A very simple exercise. If I take my arm into abduction, okay, I take a medicine ball, small one, not heavy, just place on the wall. Or if you can't medicine ball, forget, simple take a pillow, place on the wall, and with the elbow extended, just press on it. Just press on the wall, technically called humeral head depressions. Then perform small motions on the wall. So what this will do, it will work on the rotator cuff, along with it also work on the scapular muscles and the trunk. So you're moving in sync. It's activating your trunk, scapula, and your rotator cuff. You also have something called as wall washes. Don't take every exercise, yeah, what is there we can do. Always check clinical feasibility, what works good. In wall washes, what we do, take a small towel or a pillow and move on the wall. What this does, along with scapular stability, it also works in a significant manner on the rotator cuff muscles as well. Okay, so I'm not trying to teach you the entire concept here, not possible in the webinar. I'm trying to give you an idea, key factors here. How to check for scapular dysfunctions, 6 scapula, test you should remember. Okay, and whenever you're working on it, guys, okay, always understand not all shoulder pains are frozen shoulders. To be a frozen shoulder, it has to have a capsular pattern and many other things some other time. But check for the scapular positions. If you're working rotator cuff or impingement, you think there is a problem, first sequentially your trunk, your scapular stability, and then rotator cuff. Then when you have a decent enough strength, the base is stable, then also progress towards rotator cuff. There's no harm. Okay, but don't jump towards those things. Always work sequentially. Okay, so I've tried to give you a brief introduction on this. Let me see, something else is left. Low row scapular clocks. Yes. So always work sequentially on the cases. Now, try to keep a small introductory session for you. Any questions, Deepmala madam, from the students? You can feel free to let me know. We can discuss. I can see some questions here. No, that's Mahendra's message.
Yes, sir. Madam will start with some questions.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Feel free. Feel free. That's why I've kept more time for this.
Yeah. I request all the participants to also, clear their questions or clear their doubts if they have any. Please raise your hand so that we can enable you to talk to sir, or probably drop in a message on the chat box.
Scapular dyskinesia and not
Yes.
sick. So is like for our freshers, the students who have just come out,
Yes.
how will they differentiate exactly? We should concentrate only the scapular dyskinesia, that is the 3 stages, or it is a 6 scapula.
Again, ma'am, many times they are interchangeable.
Yes, sir.
They used, even if you see the literature by the authors, be it Keebler or Burkhardt, they have used interchangeably. But dyskinesis in essence basically means any abnormality in the position or motion of scapula, okay,
yes, sir,
due to altered recruitment patterns of the muscle on the thorax is dyskinesis. So that's a broad spectrum which includes all possible forms. It could be protraction, retraction, elevation, depression, any abnormality of the scapula on the thorax in position or motion is dyskinesis. Whereas 6 scapula is slightly more specific, which we commonly see in throwers or athletes.
Yes, sir.
And that has to include all the 4 components. But definitely one can lead to the other also, and the terminology sometimes in layman terms can be interchangeable also. That is the main difference.
Very true. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the answer. We have a question over here from Ratna Vora.
Yes.
The person wants to ask you about the frequency and repetition of exercises to be given for 6 scapula to maintain the stability.
Okay, Dr. Ratna, let me explain here. See,
Yes.
this is what happens here, no? Our mindset, with all due respect to the person who asked the question, our mindset of this repetition, this is where we get stuck. It's always subjective, ma'am, because see, the person who has come to me, his age, his pain tolerance, and the extent of dysfunction, depending on that, I will customize a protocol. Suppose if I have a protocol, even if it's a best protocol from Broadsman, some good protocol, but still if the patient cannot continue the protocol, I will definitely modify it, right? So that's why I never believe, my personal opinion, to have fixed protocols for any condition, because every person's pain tolerance, exercise capacity, and the way he responds to therapy in general is different. So I believe take the exercise which are feasible, which work good for the patient, but you always customize depending on the patient's response. Never have a fixed minded, I'll do 5-6 times. Okay, if I have thought, I'll do 10 sets of wall washers. But if I feel in 5 or 6 ki today she is not able to perform or he is not able to perform, I will definitely cut short and progress in the future sessions. Do a bit of release, maybe work on the tissues, make the patient comfortable, then work. So always depends. If we give a fixed answer, I might be safe because I'll give a reference of a book, but that actually not the right way of doing it. Okay, always customize the exercise prescription depending on the patient. You can have rough ideas, you can take rough reference points from literature, but always customize it depending on the patient.
Very
That's
well
all.
explained, sir.
My pleasure.
I hope, Dr. Ratna, you have received your answer. It's very important to make the protocols according to the patient, not a fixed
So true, so
protocol for
true,
everyone. You cannot
so
have
true,
it, you have to tailor it. Okay.
so true, so true.
Sir, we have the next question coming up as how long a sick scapula might take to get its stability back?
Very good. Again, a good question. See, if the patient has come to you in earlier stages, and if he's an athlete, okay, usually they respond faster, better, because they are acclimatized to performing exercises. So you can have a quicker response, maybe in a couple of weeks or months. But if it is a chronic case, which has also led to a capsular tightness or sometimes even a contracture, it will take longer period. Again, it depends on the patient which stage he comes up to. Okay, if he comes in the initial stage, see what happens is when people have, unless they have pain, they will not come. If patient feels ki, I'm having a little reduction in my pace, it's okay. Little bit problem in throwing, it's okay. Only when he has debilitating pain, that's when they come to physios. So that becomes a bit of an issue. But yeah, if they come in the earlier stages, or if physios, you're working suppose with a team, you're a physio of a sports team, and you see those patterns, you see those symptoms of patient moving and shrugging the shoulder, you have to then and there take them and screen them. Does he have a problem? Will he have a problem in the future? Screen them then and there. That's where the sports physio, our job becomes important.
I hope the answer is clear for everybody. It's very important to understand, guys, that
Yes, ma'am.
you have to decide according to the protocol how much a patient can take. It's not about how much you will give to the patient.
Exactly.
Okay, so every patient is different and every physio is also different. So you have to consider that also and see how long will you take for the patient to get the stability also. Okay, sir, we have Rajat Joy asking a very beautiful question like in slap lesion, internal rotation will be restricted. So how to perform a doorway stretch? How is it possible?
No, again, this is, see, if there is a lesion, when there is the lesion, right, at that time you do not necessarily have to perform. Okay, as it improves, as the pain comes down, the healing starts that time. And if you are doing any, forget the doorway stretch, your point of doing doorway is to improve the rotation, right? So always progress gradually. If you have severe pain also, be it doorway stretch, sleeper stretch, you always progress gradually, as we have in manual therapy P1, P2. As manual therapists, or even we play with the P1, we go around it, we never cross it. That's one very important thing. So when you're doing the stretch also, same concept you can use. You go to the range of the pain, to the point of the pain, you can nudge a little bit, but do not cross. But when you are trying to break the barriers, get a new mobility, slight the pain, you even if you don't want to, you will cause, but you have to judge it till you have to progress gradually, session to session. In one session, suddenly, many times when you do in PA shoulder cases, right? Like many times people get little macho about it. Do exercise, you take painkiller, nothing will happen. That's not the way. You'll cause a little bit pain, but nudge on the pain, and slowly as you progress, even the patient's pain tolerance improves. The patient's response to you handling the patient also improves. So you have to go gradually with that. Don't suddenly bombard stimuli and start with too much stretches. Even if he's doing a doorway stretch, you have to supervise it. It till where you can go in that session, then stop, come back, then progress accordingly.
So very beautifully explained the dosage, which we physios always miss.
Yes,
guys, please try to understand that physio treatment also has dosage. It is not only the medicines which has got dosage. So you should always remember what dosage this patient will need, in which stage this patient is.
exactly.
Okay. Yes.
And in our work, what happens, even the dosage are so, see, like if you have a medicine, a person can give, okay, this is your weight, you take this much of milligram. But in our work, what happens, there are so many factors playing a role that it's a very subjective process deciding the dosage. So that depends on the discretion of the therapist also.
Yes, sir. Very true. Very true. Sir, we have one more question coming up, that can scapular malposition lead to supraspinatus tear? This is again by Rajat Joy. Dr.
Okay.
Rajat.
Let me explain, ma'am. As I said, suppose you take disc kinesis or six scapula of the type 1 where there is tilting. So here what happens? Definitely the length tension relationship of the supraspinatus changes. So there will be a pain, okay? There might be a tendinopathy there. It might be at the tenoosseous junction or the musculotendinous junction. Now this starts
Yes, sir.
off as a tendinitis or a tendinopathy. He will have pain, will do your MT cams and treatment. But in due time, if you do not correct the causative factor, which is the scapular imbalance, and patient, if he's an athlete, he keeps doing the activity with that faulty position, slowly, that wear and tear can ultimately lead to a tear also. That's why early intervention and correcting the fault is so important. So the answer to your question is yes, in some cases we have seen where the scapular malposition in the long run has affected and caused damage to the tendons too. It can definitely cause if you don't work on the cause and keep work only on the symptoms. So it can.
I hope Rajat, Dr. Rajat, your question has been answered beautifully by sir, both the questions. Sir, we'll move on to the next question.
Sure.
We have Dr. Abhishek Tiwari. He says, I have seen a patient of frozen shoulder. His inferior angle of scapula was prominent. He tried to improve the position of scapula, but could not work, and it's a 2-month-old case. So he wants some suggestion regarding that.
Okay. The person's name, please. Abhishek.
Dr. Abhishek Tiwari.
Dr. Abhishek advises for you. First thing, sir, understand. I mean, I'm sure if you have it's a frozen shoulder only, but check if it's a true frozen shoulder, or sometimes you also have pseudo frozen shoulder cases wherein you have muscle imbalances, you have limitations, so we assume it's a frozen shoulder. So if capsular pattern is there and it's a true frozen shoulder, then again you can work on the scapular stabilization also and work on the capsule also. Okay. One more thing I commonly do in frozen shoulders. He had limitation in which motion, ma'am? What you were saying?
So, no, motion he has not mentioned, sir. He has said that there is prominency in the inferior angle. But the treatment, he tried to reposition, but it didn't work. It seems it's a 2-month-old case.
Okay. In such cases, what we do, Mr. Dr. Abhishek, again, see, many practitioners today, with all due respect, evidence-based people also say only active correction. I believe everything has a role. When we see such cases, first I will try to reposition his inferior angle of scapula via a passive modality such as taping. If it's severely up, impositioned, I will use a rigid tape and position that. Why, you if you ask? Because I'm passively correcting the position of that, which renders the lower traps in a proper length tension relationship, hence it can recruit better. Then slowly as I progress, I will wean off the passive modality of taping and go towards the active correction, that is activating and strengthening his lower traps, at the same time also working on his pectorals. I'm pretty sure if he has this, that means he also has overactivity of the pectorals and underactivity of the lower traps and middle traps. So initially he can't regain the control in one day. Okay, so it's difficult. So first go for a passive modality which helps position the scapula, in turn helping it improve the muscle length tension relationship. Then gradually progress towards recruitment patterns of the retractors, lower and middle traps. Then also work on the release of the tight muscles. That way you might get better results in such cases. And if it's a true frozen shoulder, along with this, also work on the inferior capsule, posterior inferior capsule. That also will help you.
Dr. Abhishek, I think you got a lot of advices and new treatments to be trying with your patient. Sir, we have one more question. The person has not mentioned his name, but he has some doubts regarding sleeper stretch. According to the person, sleeper stretch has got more harm. I mean, disadvantages more than the advantages. So what is your take on this?
Again, see, it's also, literatures keep coming up, we see, but sleeper stretch, there are variants also. There is sleeper stretch. There is also something called as rollover sleeper stretch, okay, in which you lift your body up and further push it, okay. If done properly, administered properly, it can be done well. If it had disadvantages, again, see, it also depends on how you administer it, right? So I think that is subjective. But we do have enough evidence stating it's quite beneficial. But again, with due respect to the other person, he might have had some experiences. We'll not disregard that. So any therapist, see, whatever you use, be it sleeper stitch or manual therapy, whatever, everything has different conjectures, right? Opinions are there. Some say this works, doesn't work, but depends on how you're administering it properly or no, and the patient you're doing it at. So it depends on various factors. We'll not disregard his point. He might have an experience with that. So no issue.
Yes, yes, yes. Any more questions, viewers? Can I get some more questions? Any doubts? Please put it in the question and answer box so that I can just ask with sir. I think, sir, your presentation was quite very clear. Everybody has understood, not much of questions.
My pleasure,
And the
ma'am.
questions which the questions they have asked is, of course, very reasonable questions our
Yes,
physios have asked
sure, ma'am.
beautifully.
Sure, definitely.
We'll just wait for
Sometimes
a while, sir.
what
Let's
happens
see if
is
any.
when some
Yes,
people
sir.
ask a question, no, that same question might be in somebody else's mind also. It might have
True,
been
true.
cleared by the answering.
Exactly. You have already answered their questions.
No problem.
Yes. I think there's something up. So we have a question by a person, again, the name is not been mentioned. They're asking
problem.
that can pain modalities be used for relieving pain?
Why not? Yeah? Why not? Again, this in today's times, we have many of this, no, opinions and mindsets that, like many people I see, manual therapists disregard electrotherapy. This is of the past. No, 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 no. If you are good at what you do, everything has a place. Though I'm a manual therapist at heart and at passion, I also have the utmost respect for modalities. Many times, cryotherapy does wonders for us. What is the harm? If you can use ultrasound properly, in my college, my teachers taught me when for posterior capsule, we can still try ultrasonic sometimes, works good. So there's no harm in using modalities. The only suggestion is do not depend completely on them. They can be used as adjuncts and as components, but definitely what you can as a manual therapist change the structure of tissues, you cannot with that much. It can be used. Definitely can be used. Nothing against modalities. They're very effective. Oh, I know.
I would also like to give a suggestion for this question, like only one treatment or only one person cannot treat a patient. It's always has to be a team of treatment or a team of people. So please always combine and give the treatment. Don't try only cryotherapy will treat and only traction will treat. It is not going to happen. So please always combine and give the treatment. Sir, we have a question again by Dr. Rajat. Not able to completely understand the traction tendinopathy which you have explained about levator scapulae. So he wants if you can just put a word about it.
Let me explain. See,
Yes,
traction tendinopathy happens in levator scapulae also, happens in pectoralis minor also in sixth scapula. Traction tendinopathy is what? When a muscle is malpositioned, the tendon gets pulled and that causes pain on the bone where it is attached, the teno-osseous junction. That in essence is traction tendinopathy. Further, you can also refer literature, detail mate is given. Basically, where the tendon attaches to the bone, it pulls on it and that causes pain at the teno-osseous junction, also at the tendon. That's in essence your traction tendinopathy.
Dr. Rajat, I hope this time you understood what sir wants to explain. Sir, a question has come, relation between neck and shoulder pain. Actually, I wanted to answer this because we are dealing more with the scapula right now, but the question has come about neck and shoulder pain. So can you please tell the relation?
Sure, ma'am. Sure. No name for the question? Okay.
Name is not there, yes.
Let me explain. Guys, when you understand the connection, it's not neck and shoulder. It's neck, thoracic spine, and shoulder. To understand the connection between segments, you have to understand something called as Freed's laws. Okay, there are a couple of laws. Please go back if you're interested and read. All the laws are there. Freed's laws you read. Okay, Freed's laws gives you a very good idea of the connection that is. Also the literature of Thomas Myers, kinetic chains. If you are, suppose example, if you have a forward neck posture, that will invariably cause effect on a thoracic spine. And thoracic spine, if you have kyphosis, that might lead to scapular tilting. Get the story? Scapular tilting can lead to inferior middle prominence, can lead to sixth scapula. I give you a simple example. It's actually not that simple, trying to explain simplistically. If you have forward neck, you also have kyphosis, that leads to your anterior tilt of scapula, causing further your dyskinesis too. So it's all connected, guys. That's why I said when you work on something, always proximal to distal, always check for connections. Forget shoulder. When you see simple cases, even you see your tennis elbows, right? Also check your cervical. There might be some radiculopathy mimicking that pain.
Correct.
So it's always
Correct, sir.
connected, guys. You have to check. That's where I say, see, one mindset I've seen in students many times is we want textbook answers. That 2 plus 2 is 4. With all due respect, guys, but it doesn't work that. When patients come to you, you have to do the calculations.
True.
That's something which only comes with your acumen and clinical practice. Because even if I tell Kichiro, this is connected, it's for one patient I'm telling. Some other patient might have a different connection. So that's where your assessment skills come into picture. But to answer your question, definitely there's a connection, be it cervical, thoracic, scapula, shoulder, it's all connected. And one suggestion is try to refer Freed's laws. It gives you a very good idea of these connections.
That's what sir wants to explain over here, is that what we read and what we see is little different.
So
every
true.
Patient treatment, you have to understand the patient and put the treatment on the patient. We cannot put the treatment according to what is written in the protocols in the books. So
true,
please
so
understand the patient and understand their symptoms and start treating the patient.
So
any more questions, viewers?
I think we'll close it here, madam.
Yes, sir. I think they have asked, most of them have asked very beautiful questions. Now, I think we should close up. Thank you so much, sir. It's been really interesting and very knowledgeable. It was a very fruitful evening for everyone. Sir, we have a very important question over here.
Sure, ma'am.
Dr. Zayed. So Dr. Zayed is asking that after open heart surgery, patient is unable to do shoulder movement because of shoulder pain. So which muscles we should work on?
Very good question. Post open heart surgeries, what we see is many times due to the sternotomy also. Patients tends to have tightness in the, what is this, mediastinal area. Okay, the sternalis muscle, sternalis, it gets affected. Also your pec major. So what we do here is, as therapists, being an MFR practitioner, you can use any other form of soft tissue release. We commonly work on, start from a platysma, okay, soften it, release it, then work on your sternalis and pectoralis major. This, when you start off, you get very good range. Okay, then also work on the detractors gradually. But when you're working on such cases, guys, I always discuss with the cardiac surgeon how much is it possible to tax the patient, how much can we start off with the exercise. Always discuss with them, keep them in the loop, and then start off. In such cases, we don't go for any high intensity maneuvers, no thrust, nothing. Simple soft releases, platysma, sternalis, pectorals, and you have a good result there and then and there. Then progress towards retractors and all. It helps you get scapular mobility to shoulder mobility also.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Zayed, I guess you have got your answer explained very well by sir. And I would like to end it up here now. And thank you so much, sir, for being such a fruitful evening. You have provided a lot of knowledge about sick syndrome relation with the shoulder dysfunctions. Very nice. Thank you so much. I will hand over to Mahendran, sir, now.
Thank you, ma'am, for coordinating so well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deepamala. It was a wonderful evening. Dr. Rizvi being able to clear so many myths about the CIP6 scapula, and I'm sure most of the people would benefit out of it, and will try to utilize the knowledge that they gain in the practice that they do. Thank you so much, Dr. Rizvi, for taking your time and being a part of the webinar. We hope to see many more webinars. We hope to see many more webinars of yours. Educating students and physios to help practice them better. Thank you so much, and we'll wind up the session here. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Deepamala.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite.
Always thank you so much, sir. Thank you, KSPF. Yes. Thank you so much, Rizvi, sir. Thank you so much, Mahendran, sir.
My pleasure. Signing
Thank
off.
you. Thank you.